right, everyone, settle down, settle down. Put the oat milk lattes where they can't spill on the tablets. And please, for the love of all that's holy, if I see one more person scrolling through a "Which Taylor Swift era are you" quiz, I'm going to lose it. Today, we're diving into a story that makes Game of Thrones look like a polite tea party at your grandmother's house. We're talking about 2 Samuel. Now, if you think your career networking is going poorly, I want you to consider a nameless Amalekite from chapter 1. This guy finds King Saul dead on the battlefield. Saul, the man who'd been chasing David around like a vengeful ex for years. This Amalekite thinks, here's my big break. I'll take Saul's crown to David, tell him I finished the job, and he'll give me a corner office and a signing bonus. Spoiler alert, he was wrong. Very, very wrong. David didn't throw a party. He went into full-blown mourning and had the messenger executed for stretching out his hand to destroy the Lord's anointed. It's the ultimate read-the-room fail. And that's how 2 Samuel kicks off. It's a 40-year saga of triumphs and, let's be honest, some pretty spectacular mess-ups. We've got David, the shepherd boy who's finally stepping into the spotlight, but the road to the throne isn't exactly paved with rose petals. It's more like a muddy track through a minefield. After Saul and Jonathan die, and David's lament for Jonathan is truly one of the most touching bromance moments in ancient literature, David goes to Hebron. He's anointed king over the house of Judah. Simple, right? Wrong, because Abner, Saul's general, decides he's not ready to let go of the family business. He takes Saul's son, Ishbosheth, whose name, by the way, roughly translates to man of shame, which is a terrible start in life, and makes him king over the rest of Israel. What follows is a long, grueling civil war. Think of it like a corporate merger that's gone incredibly violent. You've got the house of Saul getting weaker and weaker, while the house of David is waxing stronger, as the text puts it. It's the original hustle culture, but with more swords. There's this one battle at the Pool of Gibeon that gets incredibly weird. 12 guys from each side decide to have a contest, and they all end up killing each other at the exact same time. It's like a scene directed by Quentin Tarantino. And then there's the tragedy of Asahel. This guy was Joab's brother, and the text says he was as light of foot as a wild roe. Basically, he was the Usain Bolt of the ancient world. He starts chasing Abner, the rival general, and Abner keeps telling him, "Kid, stop. I don't want to kill you. Your brother Joab will never let me hear the end of it." But Asahel wouldn't turn aside. He had that main character energy that usually gets you killed in the first act. Abner ends up killing him in self-defense, and that sets off a blood feud between Abner and Joab that eventually ends with Joab murdering Abner in a gateway. David is furious because Abner had just agreed to defect and bring all of Israel over to him. It's a political disaster. Stay with me here, because the drama doesn't stop. Ishbosheth, the man of shame, gets murdered in his bed by two of his own captains, Rechab and Baanah. They think they're doing David a favor, bringing him Ishbosheth's head like it's a door prize. David, keeping with his don't kill kings in their sleep policy, has them executed too. He's consistent. You've got to give him that. He's not interested in winning by dirty tricks. Eventually, all the tribes of Israel show up in Hebron and say, "Okay, we get it. You're our bone and our flesh. Let's make this official." David is 30 years old when he starts his reign over all of Israel. He's been king of Judah for 7 years, and now he's got the whole map. His first big move? He needs a new HQ. Hebron is fine, but it's not the place. He sets his sights on Jerusalem, which was held by the Jebusites. They were so confident David couldn't get in that they taunted him, saying even the blind and the lame could hold the city against him. David takes that personally. He finds a way in through the water shaft, the gutter, and suddenly, Zion is the city of David. It's the ultimate Mission Impossible move. Now, here's where we get into the spiritual meat of the notebook. David isn't just a general, he's a worshiper, and he wants the Ark of the Covenant, basically the physical presence of God on earth, in his new capital. But man, the first attempt was a catastrophe. They put the ark on a new cart mistake number 1. They were supposed to carry it, and when the oxen stumbled, a guy named Uzzah reached out to steady it and died on the spot. David was terrified. He was like, "How shall the ark of the Lord come to me?" He leaves the ark at the house of Obed-Edom for 3 months, and when he sees that Obed-Edom is being blessed, he decides to try again, but this time he's doing it by the book. This leads to the famous David dancing before the Lord scene. He's wearing a linen ephod, basically a simple priest's garment, and he is losing his mind with joy. He's leaping, he's shouting, he's totally uninhibited. His wife Michal, Saul's daughter, watches from a window and is absolutely disgusted. She thinks he's being vile and shameless, behaving like a vain fellow. But David's response is iconic. He basically says, "I'll be even more vile than this. I'm doing this for the Lord who chose me over your father." It's a moment of total humility and total passion. He doesn't care about his image, he cares about his God. And the text notes that Michal remained childless after that, a heavy-handed way of saying her bitterness cut her off from the future of the kingdom. But okay, let's get to the real centerpiece of 2 Samuel, the thing that's going to be on the exam, folks. Chapter 7. This is the Davidic Covenant. David is sitting in his fancy new cedar palace, and he feels guilty. He tells Nathan the prophet, "I'm living in a palace, but God's ark is still in a tent. I should build him a house." Now Nathan initially says, "Sure, go for it." But then God speaks to Nathan that night. And God says, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Did I ever ask for a house? I've been moving in a tent since Egypt. You're not going to build me a house, David. I am going to build you a house." This is the big pivot. It's not about a physical building, it's about a house, as in a dynasty, a legacy. God promises that David's throne will be established forever. This is massive. This is what sets the stage for everything that comes later in the Bible. It's the promise of a king who will never fail. And David's response? He doesn't go, "Yeah, I deserve this." He goes into the tabernacle, sits before the Lord, and prays one of the most humble, staggering prayers in the Old Testament. He says, "Who am I, O Lord God? And what is my house that thou hast brought me hitherto?" He's overwhelmed by the grace of it all. I want to pause here because the notebook makes a really interesting point about this prayer. It says we should pray from our position of being seated with Christ. David sat before the Lord. He didn't come to God like a beggar hoping for a scrap. He came as someone who knew his position. He took the promise God gave him, and he basically said, "Okay, God, you said it, now do it." The notebook calls this making a demand on the promise. Think of it like this. If I give you a check for $1 million, you don't go to the bank and beg the teller, "Please, if it's your will, could I maybe have some of this money?" No. You hand them the check, and you demand what is already yours. That's how David prayed. He knew God's faithfulness. He knew that when God speaks a word, it's already a done deal. He was a man after God's heart, not because he was perfect. We'll get to Bathsheba next week and see just how not perfect he was, but because he was a kindred spirit with God. He was a worshiper. He was quick to repent. He was focused on God's glory, not his own. The rest of the material we're looking at today covers David's military successes. He's subduing the Philistines, the Moabites, the Syrians. He's expanding the borders. He's bringing in tribute. He's establishing justice. He's at the absolute peak of his power. It's the golden age. But I want you to remember the man after God's heart theme. The notebook reminds us that being after God's heart isn't about your education or your family pedigree. David was a simple shepherd. It's about being someone in whom God finds a special affinity and delight. It's about being a kindred spirit. When you look at David's life in 2 Samuel, you see a guy who was pursued, who was a fugitive, who wrote his best songs in caves while hiding from a madman. And yet, when he finally gets the crown, he doesn't become a tyrant. He doesn't forget where he came from. Well, at least not yet. There's this bit about Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, who was lame in his feet. In that culture, a new king would usually wipe out any surviving members of the previous dynasty to prevent a coup. But David asks, "Is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" He finds Mephibosheth, brings him to the palace, and gives him a permanent seat at the king's table. That's grace, pure and simple. That's David's heart reflecting God's heart. Now, I know I've been talking for a while, and some of you are starting to look like you're contemplating the ceiling tiles. But don't miss the takeaway here. 2 Samuel shows us that God's faithfulness isn't dependent on us being good enough. It's about God's promise. David's reign was established because God said it would be. And when we pray, we're supposed to do what David did. We take the word God has spoken, those promises in the book, and we present the check. We don't pray from a place of defeat. We pray from a place of dominion because we're seated with Him. It's about authority, not just asking. I see some of you packing up. Hang on, I've got 3 minutes left. If there's one thing you remember from this lecture, let it be this. David's greatest strength wasn't his slingshot or his sword. It was his ability to stay low before God even when he was high before men. He was a king who knew he had a king. Next time we'll talk about the troubles years, where things get a bit more complicated. But for today, just remember, God isn't looking for a perfect resume. He's looking for a kindred spirit. So go out there, be vile in your worship, and stop trying to steady the ark. God's got it handled. See you on Thursday. If you haven't turned in your midterm proposals, I'll assume you've decided to follow the career path of that Amalekite from chapter 1. Class dismissed. All right, settle down, everyone. Grab a seat, put the phones on silent, unless you're live tweeting my brilliance, in which case carry on. Today, we're diving into one of the most cinematic, messy, and frankly Shakespearean stretches of the Hebrew Bible, the reign of David. We're looking at 2 Samuel, chapters 4 through 17. Now, I want you to imagine the ultimate golden boy. Think of that one person who's good at everything. Valedictorian, captain of the team, plays the harp, kills giants in their spare time. That's David. But today we're going to watch what happens when the golden boy meets the midlife crisis from hell. We're talking military triumphs, PR disasters, and a family dynamic so toxic it makes the Kardashians look like the Brady Bunch. Stay with me because it gets weird fast. We start in chapter 4, and let's be honest, it's a bit of a Sopranos episode. Saul is dead, and his son Ishbosheth is trying to hold on to the throne. Two of his own captains, Rechab and Baanah, decide to help David out by assassinating Ishbosheth while he's taking a nap. They bring the head to David, expecting a promotion, maybe a gift card to the local tavern. But David is horrified. He's got this strict code of honor. He says, "You killed a righteous man in his own bed," and has them executed on the spot. It's a power move. He's saying, I don't need back alley deals to become king. So chapter 5 hits, and finally, all the tribes of Israel come to Hebron and say, "Okay, Dave, you're the guy. You're our bone and our flesh." He's 30 years old, which in ancient years is basically the peak of your influencer era. His first order of business? He needs a capital. He picks Jerusalem, which was held by the Jebusites. Now the Jebusites were smug. They told David, "Even the blind and the lame could keep you out of here." Huge mistake. Never taunt the guy who killed Goliath with a pebble. David's men climb up through the water shaft. Think of it like a Mission Impossible vent crawl, and take the city. Jerusalem becomes the city of David. And the Phoenician king, Hiram, even sends him cedar trees and carpenters to build a palace. David's winning so much he's probably tired of winning. But wait, there's more. The Philistines hear David is king and they're like, "Oh, not this guy again." They attack twice. David doesn't just wing it though, he asks God for the game plan. The second time, God tells him, "Wait until you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees." How's that for a signal? It's like waiting for the bass drop at a concert. David crushes them, and suddenly, Israel is the regional superpower. Now, chapter 6 is where things get lively. David wants to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. It's the ultimate housewarming gift for his new capital. But they put it on a new cart. Mistake number 1. And when the oxen stumble, a guy named Uzzah reaches out to steady it. Boom. Dead. Now, I know what you're thinking, Professor, that seems a bit harsh for a guy just trying to help. And yeah, it's a terrifying moment. It's a reminder that the divine isn't a pet, it's a consuming fire. David gets scared and leaves the ark with a guy named Obed-Edom for 3 months. But when Obed-Edom's house starts getting blessed like crazy, think winning the lottery every week, David says, "Okay, I want that vibe back." This time they do it right. Priests, sacrifices, the whole 9 yards. And David is losing his mind with joy. He's dancing. And I don't mean a polite two-step. He's leaping and whirling in a linen ephod, which was basically a very short, very breezy tunic. His wife Michal, Saul's daughter, watches from the window and she is cringing. She's the ultimate "I'm too dignified for this" spouse. When he comes home, she mocks him. saying he looked like a shameless, vulgar fellow. David's response is basically, I was dancing for God, not for you, and I'll get even more undignified if I want to. It's a total breakdown of their marriage. Michal stays childless, and the house of Saul officially fades into the background. Skip ahead to chapter 8, and we see David's military highlight reel. He beats the Moabites, the Syrians, the Edomites. He's taking shields of gold and massive amounts of bronze. He's got a cabinet now. Joab is the general. Zadok is the priest. And his sons are chief rulers. He's at the absolute peak of the mountain. But chapter 9 gives us a look at David's heart. He remembers his best friend, Jonathan. He asks, Is there anyone left of the house of Saul that I may show kindness to? He finds out about Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, who was lame in both feet because his nurse dropped him when he was 5. In those days, a new king usually wiped out the old king's family to prevent a coup. Mephibosheth shows up expecting a death sentence, calling himself a dead dog. But David says, You're eating at my table forever. Your family. It's a beautiful moment of grace. It's David at his best. But then, chapter 11 happens. And this is the part of the exam you'll want to pay attention to, because it's the pivot point of the entire narrative. It starts with a sentence that should have danger flashing in neon lights. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David remained in Jerusalem. David is bored. He's working from home while everyone else is in the office. He's walking on his roof, the ancient version of scrolling through Instagram at 2 a.m., and he sees Bathsheba. She's beautiful. He sins for her. He sleeps with her. She gets pregnant. Now, if this were a modern PR crisis, the advisors would be scrambling. David tries to cover it up by bringing her husband, Uriah the Hittite, back from the front lines. He figures Uriah will go home, sleep with his wife, and think the baby is his. But Uriah is too honorable. He refuses to go home while his buddies are sleeping in the dirt at the front. David even tries to get him drunk, but Uriah still won't go home. So David does the unthinkable. He sends Uriah back to the front with a letter. It's Uriah's own death warrant. He tells Joab, put Uriah where the fighting is fiercest and then pull back. Joab does it, Uriah dies. David marries Bathsheba. Problem solved, right? Wrong. The final verse of chapter 11 says, But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. Chapter 12 brings in Nathan the prophet, and Nathan is a genius at the gotcha moment. He tells David a story about a rich man with thousands of sheep who steals a poor man's only little ewe lamb to feed a guest. David is furious. He shouts, The man who did this deserves to die. And then Nathan points his finger and says the 4 most terrifying words in the Bible, You are the man. David collapses. He repents. But Nathan tells him there are consequences. The sword shall never depart from your house. And boy, he wasn't kidding. The baby dies. And then David's family starts to implode. Now, I'm going to skip the grisly details of chapter 13, but basically, David's eldest son Amnon does something horrific to his half-sister Tamar. David is very angry, but he does nothing. He's a passive father now, maybe because his own moral authority is shot. So Absalom, Tamar's brother, takes matters into his own hands. He waits 2 years, talk about a long game, and then has Amnon murdered at a party. Absalom flees into exile for 3 years. Eventually, Joab, who is basically the political fixer of the kingdom, tricks David into letting Absalom come back to Jerusalem. But David won't see him. For 2 years, Absalom is in the city but can't see the king's face. Now let's talk about Absalom for a second. He is the ancient world's version of a boy band heartthrob. The text says there was none to be so much praised as Absalom for his beauty. He's got this incredible hair. He only cuts it once a year because it gets too heavy. When he cuts it, it weighs 200 shekels. That's like 5 pounds of hair, people. Think of the shampoo budget. Absalom is gorgeous, he's charismatic, and he's bitter. He starts standing by the city gate. When people come with legal problems, he says, "Look, your claims are great, but the king hasn't appointed anyone to hear you. If I were judge, I'd give you justice." He's literally campaigning at the DMV. He does this for years, stealing the hearts of the men of Israel. In chapter 15, the trap springs. Absalom goes to Hebron, blows a trumpet, and declares himself king. The conspiracy is so strong that David, the great warrior, has to flee Jerusalem. This is the low point. David is walking up the Mount of Olives, barefoot and weeping, with his head covered. It's a complete reversal of his glory days. As he's fleeing, a guy named Ziba shows up. Now Ziba was Mephibosheth's servant. Ziba brings David a bunch of supplies, bread, raisins, wine, and tells David, Mephibosheth stayed in Jerusalem because he thinks he's going to get the kingdom back. David, in his stress, believes him and gives Ziba all of Mephibosheth's land. Later we'll find out Ziba was probably lying, but David is in survival mode. Then comes Shimei. Shimei is from Saul's family, and he's been waiting years for this. He follows David's entourage along a ridge, throwing rocks and dirt, yelling, "Come out, you bloody man, you son of Belial." David's general, Abishai, is like, "Sir, let me go over there and take off this dead dog's head." But David says no. Maybe God told him to curse me. Maybe if I endure this, God will look on my affliction and requite me good. It's David's old humility coming back, tempered by a lot of pain. Meanwhile, back in Jerusalem, Absalom moves into the palace. He's got 2 advisors. One is Ahithophel, whose advice was considered as reliable as an oracle of God. Ahithophel tells Absalom, "Go after David now, tonight, while he's tired." It was the right move. It would have ended David. But David had a plant in the palace, a spy named Hushai. Hushai stands up and says, "Actually, Ahithophel is wrong. Your father is a warrior. He's like a bear robbed of her cubs. If you attack now and lose even a few men, people will say Absalom is losing. Instead, gather all of Israel, and you lead them yourself like a great conqueror." Hushai is playing on Absalom's ego. He's essentially saying, "Don't you want the big cinematic battle where you're the star?" Absalom loves it. He ignores Ahithophel. When Ahithophel sees his advice is ignored, he knows the coup is doomed. He goes home, sets his house in order, and hangs himself. It's the first recorded instance of a political advisor resigning because the candidate wouldn't stay on script. Hushai gets word to David to cross the Jordan River immediately. David escapes into the wilderness to regroup, and the stage is set for a massive civil war between father and son. So, what's the takeaway here? Before you all go off to lunch, think of David's life like a bell curve. He starts as the shepherd boy with the sling, rises to the peak of the empire through faith and courage, but then his character cracks. One afternoon on a rooftop changes the trajectory of his entire life. The sword Nathan promised, it's not just a metaphor, it's his own children fighting over his throne. The lesson? Character isn't just about how you handle the giants. It's about how you handle the afternoon on the roof when you think no one is looking. Power can build a kingdom, but it takes more than power to hold a family together. All right, that's all the time we have. Read through the next few chapters. The ending of the Absalom saga is, well, let's just say it involves a very large tree and that famous hare. See you next time. Don't forget to check the syllabus. All right, everyone. Settle down. Settle down. Grab your coffee. Find a seat. Yes, even you in the back row, who's clearly trying to hide a nap behind that massive textbook. Today, we're diving into the absolute train wreck that was the final years of King David's reign. If you thought your family Thanksgiving was awkward because your uncle started talking about crypto again, you haven't seen anything yet. We're talking about David's late reign, rebellions, songs, and censuses. It's basically the season 5 of a prestige TV drama where the writers decided to just go absolutely wild because they knew they weren't getting renewed for a season 6. We've got hair-based fatalities, decapitations by committee, literal giants, and a census that ends in a national plague. I know. Bear with me. It's going to be a wild ride. Let's pick up where the chaos is already at a boiling point. We're in the aftermath of Absalom's rebellion. Now remember, Absalom was David's son, the one with the incredible hair and the even bigger ego. He tried to steal the throne, and it ended poorly. You've probably heard the story. He's riding his mule through the forest, his luscious locks get caught in an oak tree, and he's just hanging there like a very expensive, very treasonous ornament. David's general, Joab, who, let's be honest, is the kind of guy you'd hire if you needed a hitman but definitely wouldn't invite to your birthday party, sees him and thinks, well, the king said be gentle, but I'm more of a finish the job kind of guy. He kills Absalom right there. Now, here's where it gets weirdly relatable. David gets the news, and he doesn't celebrate the victory. He doesn't throw a parade. He has a total emotional breakdown. He's up in the chamber over the gate crying, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would God I had died for thee." It's heartbreaking, truly. But Joab has the emotional range of a brick. He walks in and basically tells David to get his act together. He says, "You've shamed your servants today. You love your enemies and hate your friends." It's a total HR nightmare. Joab basically threatens that if David doesn't go out there and thank the troops who just saved his life, they're all going to desert him by morning. And you know what? It works. David dries his eyes, puts on his "I'm the king" face, and goes out to the gate. It's a masterclass in how leadership often requires burying your soul for the sake of the brand. But wait, it gets messier. As David is trying to head back to Jerusalem, a massive argument breaks out between the tribe of Judah and the other 10 tribes of Israel. It's like a group project where everyone is fighting over who contributed more. The men of Israel are like, "We have 10 parts in the king, we're his biggest fans." And the men of Judah are like, "Yeah, well, he's our actual relative, so back off." It's petty, it's loud, and it's the perfect environment for a guy named Sheba to start a brand new rebellion. Sheba is described as a man of Belial, which is ancient speak for a real piece of work. He blows a trumpet and says, "We have no part in David, every man to his tents, O Israel." And just like that, the northern tribes follow him. David realizes he's got another civil war on his hands. He looks at Amasa, his new commander, who ironically was the guy leading Absalom's rebel army just 5 minutes ago, and tells him to get the troops together. But Amasa is apparently not great with deadlines. He takes too long, and David gets nervous. He sends Abishai and Joab out to deal with Sheba. And here comes Joab again. Honestly, if Joab is in a scene, someone is about to have a very bad day. He meets Amasa at the great stone in Gibeon. Joab does the classic, "Hey brother, how are you" move, grabs Amasa's beard with his right hand to kiss him. Totally normal greeting back then, don't try it at your internship. And then accidentally drops his sword out of its sheath. He picks it up, and before Amasa can even blink, disembowels him. It's brutal. It's Game of Thrones level cold. Amasa is left wallowing in the middle of the highway while the troops just stand there staring until someone finally drags the body into a field and throws a cloth over it. They finally corner Sheba in a city called Abel-Beth-Makkah. Joab starts building a siege ramp ready to tear the walls down. But then, a wise woman calls out from the wall. I love this woman. She's the only person in this entire narrative who seems to have a functioning brain. She says, "Joab, what are you doing? This is a peaceful city. Why are you trying to destroy a mother in Israel?" Joab surprisingly listens. He says, "I don't want to destroy the city. I just want that guy Sheba." And the woman says, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Oh, is that all? Hang on a sec. We'll toss his head over the wall to you." And they do. They hold a quick town meeting, decide Sheba isn't worth the trouble, chop off his head, and throw it down. Problem solved. Joab blows the trumpet, everyone goes home, and David's throne is safe again. Talk about efficient conflict resolution. Now, you'd think things would settle down, but then we hit a 3-year famine. David asks God what's going on, and the answer is basically, Saul, the previous king, was a jerk to the Gibeonites. See, the Gibeonites had a treaty with Israel, but Saul tried to wipe them out anyway. It's like a generational debt that David has to pay off. He asks the Gibeonites, "How can I make this right?" They don't want gold or silver. They want blood. They demand 7 of Saul's descendants to be executed. David agrees, but he spares Mephibosheth because of his old promise to Jonathan. This leads to one of the most haunting images in the text, Rizpah, Saul's concubine, standing guard over the bodies of her 2 sons for months. She's out there on the rock, from the beginning of harvest until the rains come, keeping the birds and the wild animals away from the corpses. It's a gut-wrenching display of motherly grief. When David hears about it, he's moved. He finally goes and gathers the bones of Saul and Jonathan and these 7 men and gives them a proper burial. Only then does the famine end. It's a stark reminder that in this world, the past never really stays in the past. All right, stay with me, because we're moving into the action movie montage of David's late years. The Philistines are back, and they've brought giants. There's Ishbi-Benob, whose spear weighed 300 shekels of brass. David goes out to fight him, but gets exhausted. He's getting old, after all. Abishai has to step in and save him. After that, David's men are like, "King, you're the light of Israel. Please stop going into battle. You're going to get yourself killed, and then we're all in trouble." Then we hear about Sibbeshai killing a giant named Saph, and Elhanan killing the brother of Goliath. Wait, didn't David kill Goliath? Yes, this is one of those will be on the exam points of textual complexity. And finally, Jonathan, David's nephew, kills a guy with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. It's basically a parade of mythological level combat. But it's not all beheadings and giants. We get a glimpse into David's soul through his poetry. 2 Samuel 22 is a massive song of thanksgiving. It's high-octane cinematic imagery. He describes God bowing the heavens, riding on a cherub, and flying on the wings of the wind. He talks about thick clouds, hailstones, and coals of fire. It's David's way of saying, I've been through hell and back, but I'm still standing. He calls God his rock, his fortress, and his deliverer. It's fascinating because, despite all his flaws, and boy does he have them, David's primary identity is someone who is deeply, passionately connected to the divine. He sees his military victories not just as his own skill, but as God teaching his hands to war. Then we get the last words of David. It's like the final track on a legendary artist's last album. He talks about how a ruler must be just, ruling in the fear of God, like the light of the morning when the sun rises. He's reflecting on the ideal of kingship, even if he didn't always live up to it. And immediately after these beautiful words, we get a list of his mighty men. This is basically David's version of the Avengers. We've got Adino the Eznite, who supposedly killed 800 men at once. We've got Eleazar, who fought so long and hard that his hand literally froze to his sword. We've got Shammah, who stood his ground in a field of lentils, yes, lentils, and defeated a whole troop of Philistines while everyone else ran away. My personal favorite is the story of the 3 mighty men who broke through the Philistine lines just to get David a drink of water from the well in Bethlehem, because he mentioned he was thirsty. They risk their lives, bring the water back, and what does David do? He refuses to drink it. He pours it out on the ground as an offering to God because he says the water is basically the blood of the men who risked their lives for it. It's a powerful moment of leadership. Recognizing the sacrifice of your people and refusing to treat it as something cheap. Then there's Benaiah, who killed 2 lion-like men of Moab. And get this, went down into a pit and killed a lion on a snowy day. Why was he in the pit? Why was it snowing? We don't know, but it makes for a great story. And now, for the grand finale, the weirdest part of the whole story, the census. Now you're thinking, Professor, what's wrong with a census? My government does one every 10 years. Well, in this context, it was a massive no-no. It was seen as an act of pride, David trying to count his strength rather than trusting in God. Even Joab, the professional killer, thinks it's a bad idea. He tries to talk David out of it, but David insists. So Joab spends 9 months and 20 days counting the men of Israel and Judah. The moment the numbers are in, David's heart smites him. He realizes he's messed up. God gives him a choose-your-own-adventure of punishments through the prophet Gad. Option A, 7 years of famine. Option B, 3 months of fleeing from enemies. Option C, 3 days of pestilence. David chooses option C because he says, "Let us fall now into the hand of the Lord, for his mercies are great, and let me not fall into the hand of man." It's a profound insight. He'd rather be punished by a merciful God than by vengeful humans. A plague sweeps through the land, and 70,000 people die. It's a tragic, heavy end to the reign. David sees the angel of the Lord standing by the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite, ready to strike Jerusalem. David cries out, "I'm the one who sinned. These sheep, what have they done? Let your hand be against me." He goes to Araunah to buy the threshing floor to build an altar. Araunah tries to give it to him for free. He's terrified, obviously, but David refuses. He says, I will not offer burnt offerings unto the Lord my God, of that which doth cost me nothing. He buys the floor, builds the altar, offers the sacrifices, and the plague is stayed. And that's where the story of 2 Samuel ends. It's not a neat, happy ending. It's messy, it's bloody, and it's deeply human. It shows us a king who is a brilliant poet, a fierce warrior, a grieving father, and a deeply flawed man who occasionally makes catastrophic mistakes. If there's one takeaway from this whole chaotic saga, it's this. David's greatness wasn't that he was perfect. He was miles away from perfect. It was that he was always willing to own his mess and turn back to the rock. He didn't hide from the consequences, whether it was the head of a rebel, the grief of a mother, or a plague he brought on himself. He lived his life in the open, for better or worse. All right, that's all for today. Go forth, don't get your hair caught in any trees, and for heaven's sake, if someone offers you a drink of water from a war zone, maybe just say thank you instead of pouring it on the floor. Class dismissed.